Hey, welcome back. In this lesson we're going to break down the US trucking industry piece by piece. Sit back, enjoy, and don't forget to take notes. First, let's look at the stakeholder structure, which is the structure of the industry broken down into the hierarchical relationships of the major players, or so-called stakeholders. We'll begin with the stakeholders who own the freight that is being transported. A shipper is a company or individual who needs to transport the cargo, and a receiver is a business or individual who needs to receive the cargo. Simple enough. Good examples of shippers are such companies as Canfor, one of the largest timber producer in the nation, or Evans Fruit Company, a major producer of fresh fruits. A shipper can be any business associated with absolutely any product. It could be a factory, a farm, plantation, importer, processor, and so on. A good example of a receiver could be Walmart, the largest chain of supermarkets in the United States. At the same time, Canfor and Evans Fruit Company are also examples of receivers. As large manufacturers, they not only ship, but they also need to receive large quantities of goods. Together, shippers and receivers are called freight owners. Of course, there are transportation companies that work directly with freight owners on a contract basis. However, deals with large customers are mostly only available to large carriers because of the very large volume. Small carriers can also work directly with shippers, for example, by getting a contract from a small factory or a farm located in the same city or district as the carrier. However, small companies often go the other way. Instead of contracting with one or more customers directly, they take the goods from freight brokers. Let's talk about them. A freight broker is a business or individual who matches freight owners with trucking companies in order to organize and facilitate the movement of freight. Freight brokers are licensed to arrange transportation within the United States. They work for the shipper or the receiver and should not be confused with a dispatcher or a trucking company. A brokerage company doesn't need to own its own trucks. They provide a service to the shipper to find suitable carriers and make profit on the difference between how much money they got from the customer and how much they paid the trucking company. For example, a broker negotiated a price of $1,100 to ship imported mangoes from Miami to Jacksonville, Florida. He then found a carrier willing to move this load for $900. The remaining $200 difference is the profit the broker can put in his pocket. So, why do shippers and carriers work with brokers? Well, first of all, as we already discussed, it doesn't make sense for a large shipper to work with small trucking companies because they wouldn't be able to cover the entire volume of freight. They would have to hire employees to work for them who would essentially do what brokers do: select and supervise large number of small trucking companies as contractors. In that case, if the shipper doesn't want to deal with brokers and also doesn't want to spend money on additional full-time employees in the logistics department, they need to look for large transportation companies in their area that can cover their whole volume. Again, this will prove to be a difficult task. It's not certain that the right large company will be found and that their services will even be cheaper than through a broker. And if the transportation company doesn't meet its obligations, the shipper is again faced with problems. Working through a broker is easier for them. If the truck assigned to the shipper breaks down or can't come to the pickup for any other reason, the broker will sit down and look for another truck. The shipper gets security and delegates most of the potential logistics problems onto the broker. Some brokerage companies also have their own trucks. Such brokers are called asset-based brokers, which literally means broker that owns assets. Such brokers cover part of the orders with their own trucks and the rest with trucks of other carriers and earn here and there. Unlike dispatchers, which are in fact hired employees or contractors of the trucking company, brokers are separate players in the market. The US market for freight brokers is super competitive. It's dominated by the big players who invest millions of dollars annually in marketing, sales, data gathering, and market analysis. Small players or new brokers, especially those who are coming in from scratch and don't have their own trucks and established customers, have a very hard time in this industry. While becoming a dispatcher and finding your first customers can be done in a matter of weeks, finding a shipper who wants to work with a new brokerage company and beat the competition on pricing in today's realities is incredibly difficult and sometimes can take years. Transportation brokers are the companies that dispatchers work with directly to find freight for their trucks. It's important to get the idea right. The broker is not your client or employer. Your client is the transportation company, the carrier, the one who owns the trucks you dispatch. The broker is one from whom you get the freight. In fact, this is another player in the market with whom you will need to constantly cooperate. You can't live without each other, but your interests are not exactly the same. The broker wants to sell the cargo to the carrier at a cheaper price in order to pocket as much difference as possible. And the dispatcher, just like the transportation company he works for, wants to take the cargo at a higher price to make more money. That's essentially the whole game of the market. Remember our previous example of a load Miami to Jacksonville for which the broker got $1,100 and paid the carrier $900. If the carrier had a good dispatcher who knows the market well and is good at negotiation, he could have bargained with the broker and booked the same load for $1,000 instead of $900. Well, good negotiation is key for a dispatcher. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still have one more important stakeholder to look at. Transportation or trucking companies. In the American market, they're commonly referred to as motor carriers or just carriers. These are companies that own trucks and have a license to transport goods across the United States. This includes the dispatcher. We do not distinguish dispatchers as separate stakeholders, since they're employees of the trucking company or, in the case of remote dispatch, contractors. Motor carriers in the US are divided into several categories depending on the type of license, the motor carrier authority that they possess. Contract carrier versus common carrier. A contract carrier is a transportation company that serves specific customers. Contract carriers do not transport goods for the general public. They work only for organizations or firms with which they have a contract. Very often, contract carriers are engaged in transportation of non-standard cargo with specialized equipment. For example, transportation of compressed gas in tankers. Common carriers is a commercial enterprise which transports goods or people from one place to another. As dispatchers will focus on transportation goods, so will not get involved with transportation of people. Common carriers typically own standard, non-specialized equipment, which is suitable for movement of a large variety of goods. An example of such equipment is a truck with a refrigerated trailer, a reefer. This trailer is almost always of standard size and is suitable for transportation of any type of chilled or frozen goods, whether it's fruit, meat, or ice cream. Most carriers on the market are common carriers, and they're primary customer or employer of a remote dispatcher. By focusing on common carriers, we can divide them into two more subcategories: interstate common carriers versus intrastate common carriers. This part is quite simple. Intrastate means within a state. Interstate, from the word inter, means between states. Most dispatchers work with interstate carriers, as they are the ones who need a good dispatcher the most. The dispatcher who will analyze the market and move their trucks on the highest paying routes. However, there is nothing wrong with working with an intrastate carrier. Yes, you have to understand that such companies travel fewer miles, have lower gross revenues, and it's not always easy to find loads for them because you're limited to loads that are within the same states. On the other hand, by working with the same state, you will have a very deep understanding of freight demand and pricing, which will make you an expert at working in that region and can serve as a great value proposition when looking for other customers in the same area. When I first started my journey as a dispatcher and worked with my first carrier, all of his trucks only worked in the state of Florida, although his license allowed him to travel outside of it. Within a year, I had become a Florida guru. I knew the reasons for freight pricing in each area, personally knew every broker, I knew when fruits will come from Latin America and when the price of shipment of flowers from Miami would begin to rise actively. With that knowledge, I had no trouble finding other Florida carriers and convincing them that I knew my business and could be of great service for them. Okay, we're not done. Here are two more subcategories that common carriers can be divided into. Common carrier of household goods and common carrier of property except household goods. The first one, common carrier of household goods, Transportation companies that fall into this category are authorized as a carrier to accept payments from the public for the transportation of household goods. The definition of household goods includes anything used in the home, such as furniture or appliances. Items purchased by customers from a store or a factory that they ask to have delivered to their home are most often included in this category. The homeowner pays for the transportation costs incurred in the delivery. These movers usually work with the public rather than businesses. They help with moves or make home deliveries. They usually advertise their services offline or online on specialized websites and do not need the service of a remote dispatcher that much. Such carriers are not an ideal potential customer or employer of ours. The second one, common carrier of property. This status gives companies the right to become hired carriers of goods regulated by the US government, except household goods. These are the carriers we're really interested in. They carry all standard types of goods except household goods. Whether it's wood, building materials, fruit, meat, plastic, supermarket carts, whatever. This type of carrier works with businesses, legal entities, the very shippers and receivers who hire brokers through whom we will book the shipments from. They carry bulk goods in large volumes. Whether it's within state or across the country, these are the carriers that need your services so badly.